Welcome to Chapter 11 of your Human and Cultural Geography textbook. So this chapter in particular deals with urban geography, which is more of the landscape and really how cities are designed. So it's really urban geography, the landscapes of the city designs. So what we'll be discussing in this particular chapter deals with urban evolution. Again, we bring in the values of gentrification and how cityscapes can change. We will discuss specifically dealing with defensive strategies and how cities are designed. Perhaps they have perimeters, they have waterways, walls. How are these cities designed and why? As an example, one of the big questions is, can you think of a place in California that would have something like this? And an excellent example would be the Presidio up in San Francisco. Uh, Moving forward, within that, we can look more at site and situation factors. Again, looking at waterways. Moving forward into then the central place theory. Central place theory is that all things held are equal. There's a threshold in which goods and items can be transported for their efficiency, for both cost and for quality. And then we start moving into the actual urban morphology. You're looking at how the cities are designed. There's actually specific designs within this urban development in how we design our cities. So we have an example of a concentric ring model where the city itself is broken out into rings. In the middle is your inner city. Then you have a zone of transition, the working house, the suburbs, and the exurbs. Um, you have to remember that when cities were initially designed, many people could could not afford to live within the city, so they lived farther away. But then they had very limited public transit, and so there's just different activities that get kind of drawn within the morphology of these urban designs. There's the sector model, which means that the cities are divided up into smaller sectors, multiple nuclei, which means that all the cityscapes don't make really a whole lot of sense. Um, such as a chunk for the industrial portion, a chunk for the elite housing, a chunk for the light industrial. So it's really interesting that within these three designs, we can pretty much decipher every cityscape that we see. The big thing that has changed, initially when a city is designed, is because of the thought of public transit. The better your public transit, the better it is that people can reach out. So to kind of give you a short analogy of that would be what was known as Larry. Larry was the light rail cars that were they were in development in the late 1800s, early 1900s. There were yellow light rail cars in the city of Los Angeles. And what they did is that Larry, the little trolley cars, were able to leave downtown LA, and they went all the way up beyond Pasadena. And the reason that they did this light rail system is, one, the people who lived there had no way of transportation other than either buggy, or if they were very fortunate and privileged to have a vehicle, they could do that. But it was to bring public transit out to that location, but then it was also bringing electricity, which was a new advent. A lot of those places did not have electricity, so they used public transit to do that. The Larry cars then got bought out by the red trolley system, and then the red trolley system was removed in the 1960s. But as we find that public transit really made a big difference in how these systems were designed, and then moving forward into more present time, we look at just how the advent of the automobile and how that pretty much makes us limitless. Most people commute 45 minutes to an hour and a half one way every day. Going back to when these design models were in place, you pretty much could work where you lived. So think of how things have changed. And when you see people who are trying to work in an environment where they're green or limited emissions, they find that they have to move closer to work so they can take public transit, such as public transit or bicycles. Then when you move through the text, it moves you through what's considered the urban renewal and or neighborhood life cycle, how things change, how you have aging houses, how you move into these different suburbs, going through time with the GI Bill, Fair Housing Act of 1968, all kinds of different events that change the way that the urban landscape is designed. There's also the interest of the checkerboard sprawl, where we see there's a much cleanlier sense of checkered pieces of the landscape, housing developments in large squares, usually in 40-acre parcels or more, so 40, 80, 120. And you'll discuss more of that. Then again, going back into gentrification, dealing then with homelessness and wrapping up with the California suburb. The California suburb is a very unique thing. Many people around the world try to replicate it because of how unique the suburban lifestyle was, where you had ranch-style homes, large driveways. You have to remember there was a time when people didn't have garages in their homes, and the garages were in the alleyway in the back. Now it's become a very large focal point at the front of the house. Looking at this suburb, as you've seen in most movies, I think the best example of a suburb would either be the Brady Bunch or looking at something more like when E.T. was filmed, all filmed in Los Angeles. But nonetheless, I think those are some of the fun attributes. And when you start learning more about the housing design and the cityscape, design itself, you'll begin to learn more about what was in place. Living in Los Angeles, we have absolutely horrendous public transit. It's weird to think that pre 1950, Los Angeles had more light rail than New York and San Francisco combined. Yet we have barely any now. So San Francisco is probably the best example of great public transit, including also the BART system. But nonetheless, how does that design a city landscape, and how do we design around it? So nonetheless, I think this is an interesting topic to get through. Again, we bring in gentrification, the displacement of people. I think that's a very important thing to discuss. Make sure you understand what happens with displacement. If you want to look up an interesting form of this, look up the Chavez Ravine. The Chavez Ravine is now home to the Dodger Stadium, but that was a very interesting topic in which an entire community was annexed from their homes, and a large baseball stadium was built on top of their homes. It was for the better of the community, but it displaced families who had lived there for quite some time. So, nonetheless, very interesting. Enjoy, and we'll talk soon.